Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is literally a game changer if you're navigating the markets. We're talking about a masterclass in psychological performance and execution. A fundamental shift in how we actually view trading. Here's the core idea we're unpacking today. Professional, consistently profitable operators, they don't magically become disciplined after the market gives them certainty. No, the real secret is that they learn to maintain absolute ironclad discipline while the uncertainty is still staring them right in the face. Let's see exactly how they do it. So be completely honest with yourself for a second here. Why do you feel like you need emotional reassurance or some kind of perfect prediction before you actually enter the market? Look, a lot of traders deal with deep psychological instability when they sit down and look at the charts. You know the feeling, hesitating right after taking a loss, second-guessing your analysis, desperately needing the market to prove it's safe before you click the button. But here's the reality. The market is never, ever going to offer you permanent safety. If you're sitting there waiting for an absolute guarantee before you execute your process, you're basically trying to solve a psychological problem with a technical indicator. And trust me, that is a battle you are never gonna win. Let's talk about the chaotic reality of the retail mindset. The sheer pain of not knowing what's gonna happen causes so many traders to just completely abandon their process. I mean, picture this. You see a candle expand and suddenly, boom, FOMO kicks in and completely overrides your trading plan. Or maybe you take a loss and the sting of that triggers instant revenge trading. Or maybe you're feeling the heavy payout pressure of a funded account. So what do? You start negotiating with your own risk rules. You force continuation trades that just aren't there, and you impulsively size up. What's really happening here is that you're just reacting emotionally to every single tick in price simply because you haven't truly accepted the uncertainty. I really want you to take a second and let this sink in. Emotional urgency destroys precision. Think about that. Reacting out of fear, blindly chasing a missed entry, or executing a trade out of sheer desperation for a payout, it literally destroys your ability to execute cleanly. Precision requires a calm, collected mind. But urgency demands immediate, reckless action. Those two things absolutely cannot coexist in this space. Right, moving on. Let's talk about the actual reality of the market. It's time we pivot away from all that emotional chaos and the ego-driven need to play fortune teller and predict the future perfectly. We need to shift our focus toward the cold, mechanical reality of how the market actually functions day in and day out, and more importantly, how the professionals align themselves with that reality. Just look at the stark contrast between these two mindsets. On one side, you have the retail trader. They are constantly trying to just win the next specific trade. They're trading on hope, they're desperate for certainty, and they will do literally anything to avoid taking a small loss, which ironically usually turns it into a catastrophic one. Now look at the institutional operator. It's a completely different universe. Their absolute primary goal is simply do not die. They accept that uncertainty is just part of the furniture, it's permanent. They measure their performance over entire quarters, not tick by tick or trade by trade. And those small losses, they don't see them as a personal attack, it's just the operational overhead of running a business. So, the most crucial thing to wrap your head around is what the market actually is. Let's be clear, it is not some living, breathing monster that's out to hunt your specific stop loss on a micro contract. It just isn't. It is a highly efficient algorithmic machine. Its whole job is to create inefficiencies and then rebalance them to pair up institutional orders. It's driven entirely by liquidity delivery. The market is completely 100% indifferent to your hopes, your fears, or how badly you emotionally need a win today. It's just a matching engine, guys, not an emotional support system. Okay, so once you truly understand that cold, hard reality, it naturally leads us to the foundational framework of this whole explainer. This is the exact hierarchy that separates the mature, professional operators from the amateur gamblers. Think of this as a strict, mechanical progression. Look at what comes first here, survival. After that, risk control. Then comes process. And way down at the absolute bottom of the list is profit. Retail traders almost always flip this completely upside down. They focus entirely on the profit and just completely ignore survival. But here's the truth. You absolutely cannot leap to profit without a structured process. You can't maintain a process without solid risk control. And literally none of it matters if you don't even survive the session. And we need to talk about a reality that gets ignored way too often. Yeah, obviously blowing a funded account wipes out your financial capital. We all know that. But trading when you are emotionally unstable? That destroys your mental capital, and that's arguably worse. The emotional fatigue, the collapse of your confidence, the sheer burnout of operating from a place of fear, These things erode the very foundation of that survival hierarchy we just talked about. Protecting your mental clarity is just as non-negotiable as protecting the dollars in your account. So, how do we actually find any kind of stability when the environment itself is inherently uncertain? Well, we have to completely shift our focus. We stop trying to guess the price direction and instead we anchor ourselves to precise timing. Because when everything else is chaotic, timing survives the noise. Let's break down something called the power of 60. Basically, every single hourly candle follows a very repeatable institutional cycle. From minute 0 to 12, the algorithm is just accumulating orders. The direction is intentionally murky. If you're jumping in here, you're literally just guessing. Then from minute 12 to 20, we get the manipulation phase. You know, that false Judas swing that sweeps liquidity and knocks out the impatient early retail money. Then, and only then, from minute 20 to 45, we finally enter the distribution phase. This right here is your execution window. By simply having the discipline to sit on your hands for the first 20 minutes of the hour, you filter out so much of the noise and protect your capital from that initial manipulation. Patience creates precision. Now, I know that sounds like something you'd see on a motivational poster, but I promise you, in this context, it is a structural mechanism. Having the patience to wait for that 20 to 45-minute distribution window, that is exactly what separates high-probability institutional-style execution from premature fear-based guessing. Like we said, only timing survives the noise. Now, this brings us to what is probably the biggest psychological hurdle for most people, the skill of actually doing nothing. I know, for a highly reactive trader, sitting there and waiting genuinely feels like failing, like you're missing out. But we have to fundamentally reframe what patience is. It is not boredom. It is an active, highly demanding, top-tier skill. 7 out of 10. Remember that number. This is your emotional neutrality baseline. The framework we're looking at today outlines a very strict, completely non-negotiable rule. If your emotional stability ever drops below a 7 out of 10, you are done. You do not participate. Did you just stop out of a trade? That requires a mandatory cooling off period. If you feel any sense of urgency, frustration, or desperation creeping in, you do not have permission to execute. 0 exceptions. End of story. So why are we so obsessive about the 7 out of 10 rule? Well, because dropping below that threshold leads to severe emotional contamination. Literally, the second you lose that neutrality, the quality of your discretionary analysis goes right out the window. Suddenly, incredibly weak setups start looking totally valid to you. You start chasing big expansion candles simply because you're mad you missed the original entry. You refuse to take a tiny loss, or even worse, you feel this burning urgency to jump right back in the second you hit a manipulation stop. When you are emotionally contaminated like that, you are no longer trading your system. You are just fighting your own psychology. To put it as plainly as I possibly can, doing nothing is a high-skill activity. Being able to just walk away after your primary thesis has played out, having the discipline to refuse to overtrade just because you're bored or feeling greedy, that is the absolute hallmark of an institutionally mature operator. You don't have to catch every single move the market makes. You only have to catch the ones that perfectly align with your timing and your liquidity model. All right, as we move into the final and honestly probably the most vital part of our explainer today, we really need to redefine a word that gets tossed around way too casually in online trading culture. We need to look at what it actually means to be a consistent trader. Let's strip away all the social media hype for a second. Consistency is not magically pulling a profit out of the market every single day. It's just not. It doesn't mean you possess some crystal ball that gives you perfect predictions without any losses. True consistency is actually very simple. It's behavioral repeatability under uncertainty. It means executing the exact same mechanical behaviors, using the exact same risk parameters, inside the exact same timing windows, regardless of whether your last trade was a win or a massive loss. It's all about consistency of self, not perfection of prediction. Let me say that again. Consistency of self. Your actual edge in the markets, it's found in your own internal stability. It's found in your discipline, the integrity of your process, and your ability to be highly selective about when you participate. The strongest operators out there aren't the ones who can perfectly predict where price is going. They are simply the ones who remain the most emotionally stable while it gets there. I really want to leave you with this one lingering thought today. The market is quite literally designed to create discomfort. It is never, ever going to give you that warm, fuzzy feeling of emotional certainty before you place a trade. Sustainable long-term success only comes from maintaining calm, structured execution while that uncertainty is fully present. You simply cannot find permanent safety in the market's price action. You have to build that safety inside your own process. So at the end of the day, the ultimate question isn't whether you know where price is going next. The real question is, will your discipline survive the uncertainty?